The Becoming Flame podcast broadcasts pure, unfiltered power exchange that stokes the flame of your being. Because it's time to remember. It's time to return. It's time to become flame. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Flame. Today's guest is just a tour de force. Claire and I met when I heard that she was leading a bold and controversial campaign calling on the Church of Scotland to return a physical church building to women. Not as this symbolic gesture, but as an act of reparations for the thousands of women persecuted, prosecuted, tortured, killed, all the rest of it during the witch trials that occurred in Scotland, as they did in many parts of Europe, the Americas, and other parts of the world. These witch trials and this history is, first of all, mostly written from a male perspective. So it is a history where power was violently stripped from women and where, until now, no true repair or compensation of any kind has ever been made. But what's more important to Claire is that she is interested in rewriting her story, giving women the voice, the compensation, and the recompense they so duly deserve. Claire is asking a question most institutions, most people, most women have never had to face. What does real repair look like after centuries of violence against women? Through her campaign, she's calling on the Church of Scotland to hand back a church. That's insane to me. Like, the boldness and the bravery and the absolute audacity of this woman is to be heralded. I wanted to give her a platform where she could talk about the atrocities that were done to women who were hunted, who were silenced, who were killed in these witch trials. But most importantly, for us to see that a debt has never been acknowledged in any meaningful way, in any material way. Now, if you look at any other genocide that has taken place on Earth that affected both men and women, reparations have been paid. But no reparations in any country, by any government, by any church, have ever been made to women. This woman, Claire Standen, is an absolute badass, and she deserves of all of our support. What I love about Claire is that her work is both deeply personal to her, obviously, but it is unapologetically collective. She has supported NHS teams, educators, and leaders to move from survival into self-trust, into clarity, into embodied authority. But this next chapter that she's on, my God, is it bigger? It's visible, it's cultural, it affects all women. It's about what happens when women don't heal quietly, but start taking up space again. Claire isn't just building a project, she's midwiffing a shift, people. She is asking for your help. She is asking for you to take up space, to use your voice, to boldly ask what is rightfully a recompensation for these atrocities. So what does repair even look like? And if she gets a church, what will she do with it? Let's bring her in and ask her all of these questions. Hello, Claire. Good morning to you. My goodness, I am genuinely so excited to meet you. When I heard you on the Academy Awards, I genuinely thought, I have made the biggest ask of my life. I am this bold, amazing woman. And I heard that you were asking the Church of Scotland for a physical church. And I thought, I don't know how to think big at all. Genuinely, you floored me. I was like, I need to know this woman. Like, this is insane. Like, how do you even think that way? I'm bowing down to you is my point.
Well, thank you, because I've obviously looked you up since you reached out to me, and I feel similarly about you. I think you're amazing. Incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking of asking the Church of Scotland for a church though. So you have elevated my game. You have elevated my game. Can you take us all the way back to the beginning? How did this happen?
I will try my very best. It's one of those magical stories where the beginning is not yet clear to me.
I love it.
I could say the beginning was in 2024 when I went on an accidental pilgrimage up the north coast of Scotland and ended up finding like the grave or the stone that memorializes the last witch of Scotland who was executed in the witch trials. I could say it starts there, but I could also say it starts with a friend of mine who was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, who ignited in me a sense of we get this one life,
Mm,
get this one chance. She used to say to me, it's not a dress rehearsal with a swear word in.
yeah.
And the sense that knowing she's no longer with us in body, and she's very much with me in spirit. And there's a sense in which I know she would be so cross with me if I wasn't fulfilling my time here on earth in the biggest
Mm.
way possible. Where else could it start? I'm not really sure, Kate. I mean, in terms of the actual project and becoming something that feels like it's going to inevitably happen.
Oh, oh my God. I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
It feels so inevitable to me at this point.
Oh,
Yeah. And we're really 4 months in to having named it. I'm gonna, send the email. Hello, Church of Scotland. I would like a church, please, as reparations for the witch trials in Scotland. That was 4 months ago, and it feels like a lifetime ago because the things that have happened since then have been so synchronous,
mm,
magical, just like it's unfolding at just the right time in just the right way. And I just have to sort of follow that thread through.
yeah. One of the things that I've been sitting with is the realization that any other genocide that has happened on this earth that contained male victims have all received some form of recompense,
Hmm.
some form of an apology, some form of an acknowledgement. Now, those victims may not feel like it was enough, but it was not nothing.
Mm,
And that for me, when I heard you, I was like, my God, how has half the planet not ever thought we deserve not only an apology, we deserve just so much more than this. And I think that's what floored me in hearing you and your story was just how much talking about the witch trials there has been, how many books there have been published. This is not an unknown fact, right? And not anyone has thought, hey, I think we should ask people to compensate, like to apologize, to make this right. I think that's extraordinary. And I myself have never had that thought until came across you and your work. And that was such a powerful rewriting of my own internalization that when people wrong you, not
mm,
just a little bit, but like deeply wrong you, how much are we taught to be the bigger person, to forgive them, to rise above it. And you're like putting this line in the sand of like, oh, F that. Like, that's crap. You committed genocide. And by the way, not for a couple of years, which is what other genocides have had, for thousands of years, literally.
mhm,
For an entire nearly 2 millennia, we persecuted, prosecuted, killed, tortured, and vilified women for their power. It's extraordinary. And you're
mm.
the first person that I've ever come across that's like, hey, pay up.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge like there's this huge body of work done in Scotland to get to the apology, which was
Mhm.
done by two women, Claire and Zoe, the Witches of Scotland. And
Okay.
they did this huge campaign to get both the Scottish government and the Church of Scotland to formally apologise. And they're
Okay.
also working towards getting a memorial as a, as that kind of apology. But the thing that happened for me, I think, that means that this has so much weight and is gaining so much traction is that, like you say, this is a huge wrongdoing. And the ask that we make needs to be the right size for reparations.
Mm.
And my sense is that a memorial, plaque, statue, not sure, is not the right sized ask. It's not enough. It could happen, and we would be like, okay, that's nice. We have a place to visit, to remember. But what we need, I feel, is a place in which we can remember in the truest sense, like do the work collectively
Right.
to reclaim what was taken, which is collective feminine wisdom. And not only that, it's like at the same time as that was taken viscerally, literally from the community in terms of killing mostly women, 85% women, but thousands, at the same time as that was taken, it was also inciting fear in everybody else around following that wisdom and using those skills and tools of healing um, that were indigenous to Scotland, that should have been a part of our culture and history. And that was stripped across that time period. And we lost the people, we lost the wisdom, we lost the history, we lost the lineage. And we
Yep.
need a space in which to reinstate that within ourselves. And to me, it makes sense at an embodied level that it would be a church that we need to do that work in.
I think as someone who has Celtic origins, as so many Australians do, the searching for a culture that is innate to you, that is part of your epigenetics, that is part of your history, whether you're on Celtic lands, i.e., in the UK and Ireland, or whether you're a displaced Celtic person. What I'm seeing around the world is all of these, and this happens in European cultures that, lost their paganist and witch history as well, right? Is that there are all of these basically Eurasian people who are searching for connection to culture, to sacred rites of passage, to our own religion and our own spirituality. And in the absence of that felt culture, we're seeking out other indigenous cultures and trying to take them on as our own. And in that search, in that longing, in that sort of lost space of I don't belong anywhere, where is my culture? I think that's where the essence of, being in gray areas of using misappropriating other people's cultures, right? Because there's a lack in self, there's a lack in history, there's a lack in knowing where this is. And some of the Norse countries were able to hold on to their paganist ancestry a lot stronger. They still celebrate in some form, but you can really see that this Celtic wisdom, this paganist, which it's been so decimated, and I think what you're doing is really standing for the return of that culture, right?
Yes, exactly. Because we, as humans, require that ceremonial aspect of life.
I lost you.
Yes, and we need ceremony, and like you say, it's currently being appropriated at a grand scale from other cultures. Exactly because of this, and accidentally harming other cultures by appropriating their cultures and traditions and wisdoms. When we have our own, it's just has been so interrupted.
So what's your personal stake in this? Why do you need this?
The first thing that I have to say is just, I am mother. I am a mother. And living in a world as a mother, bringing up children where we don't have these practices, where we don't bring ceremony to things like childbirth, to that various aspects of child rearing, to puberty, to our collective upbringing of children, has been like a personal wounding for me. I've been a single mother for the last 8 years, and it's been a lonely journey. I don't think that I know at a bodily level that is not how it is supposed to be. Some of that was, hit more deeply because of things like COVID and things like that. But the truth is, it would have been much the same, honestly, in Scotland if that had happened or not. And there's also some stuff that happens as a result of the way that we view women and the role of women in the world that just It just doesn't sit right with me. And it's always been a very personal thing, as in these things are happening in my own life, in the conversations I have with my ex-husband, whereby my caring role is not acknowledged, is not compensated, is not revered as it should be, whereby the healing work that I do within myself is not seen as in deep service to my children as it should be,
Cool.
you know,
Nor to the world, right? Nor to
nor
the
to the
world.
world. And the healing of intergenerational trauma, you know, which is, as I see it, one of my major roles as a mother, is to make sure that anything that I don't want to pass on to the next generation doesn't get passed on. That's my responsibility. But that is costly. It costs time. It costs energy. It costs other resources. It costs money. And I personally have chosen to invest all of those things in that, given how deeply I feel that impacts not just me, but my children, their journey through life, their place in the world, how they see themselves. But as I see it now, this project is an opportunity to have that same conversation that is so personal to so
Mm.
many people and impacts them so deeply in their everyday life as it does me, to bring that conversation and have it powerfully with the world, not as a single woman on my own, but knowing that there are so many of us that might have been a bit too bogged down in
Mm.
the minutiae of life as it looks for women at this time, that we need to get really collective, coherent, cohesive, be in community. They all begin with C for some
All
reason.
the seeds, right?
All the C's, and just move as one to have this conversation with wider society and with the world, that actually our place as women is incredibly important to be revered. And I stand to benefit from that personally, because I want the world to look different so that our
Mm.
lives look different in the everyday.
I have a question about single motherhood and your work in the restoration of the witch or the restoration of the wise woman. Do you have a sense that it's almost 1 in 8 women in Australia, sorry, 1 in 8 mothers in Australia will raise their children as a single mother now? It's not a small statistic. It's not, it's almost 2 million mothers. So even at a numbers level, we have a very small population. It's not quite as small as Scotland's, but it's a small population compared to, the United States or anything. The women who choose, I'm going to rephrase that because I don't think anyone chooses to be a mother. I think it's your destined path. I think it's your calling. I think it's a higher purpose. So those women who choose to listen to that inner calling and that purpose are very often coming into this pathway alone, or at
Mm.
least ending up there. They're doing the work. They're showing up because they're not passing anything on, right? This is a large majority of women who are like, no, I chose this. This is an
Mhm.
initiation for me. This I am mother. This is who I be. This is what I'm here for. My birthing is one, a child, and one, a new world. This is very common. It's almost impossible to ignore. It's impossible to hear, especially if you're in the circles and the frequencies that you and I obviously run in. There's a sense that I'm getting stronger and stronger as I journey. I'm 3.5 years into motherhood. I think it's because we're supposed to remember how broken the current system is and start to really, as you're saying, demand reparation. Because it's not just that we lost our culture or just our religion or our spiritual practices or those aspects of self. We lost the very community that makes womanhood possible, right?
Yes, yes, 100%. I was
Do you
speaking to somebody
have
today.
rememberings? Do you have like memories of this?
So first thing I want to say is that I think it's no mistake that I was gifted a son and a daughter. There's something about that balance, because for me, I could be all on the warpath of the divine feminine, warrior all the way. And if I just had a daughter, it would be very easy to ignore the other side of that other aspect. But as it is, I've had to integrate with my son when he says, feels like you hate men,
Mm,
feels like you don't think men are important.
mm.
And I have to take that back into my heart and say to myself, is this what you're teaching your son? That he's not important? He's He is personally responsible for the harm in the world done to women. How are we going to balance these things? And so I would call that one of my major ongoing initiations, is how to
Mm.
balance that conversation literally in my own home, around, as we rise up as women and we reclaim our rightful place as leaders, in the world, how do we also bring men along on that journey? And there is collective healing for us all in that.
Yeah.
So
Because this
that
is not
comes,
a feminist battle, right? This is far more about matriarchy, or about love and compassion and unity and togetherness, right?
yeah, yeah. And, at its truest sense, I think that probably is feminism. The fact that we have a trouble claiming feminism for ourselves is in part because of the the circumstances in which we've had to take the feminist journey.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. Women don't want to. I'm. It's like we always have to say, I'm not that kind, of woman feminist person. So there's something in that as well. But with motherhood, I've often had this sense that women, again, because of the way that we're raised and conditioned, it's very hard often for a woman to say, I want this for myself. I want
Mm.
things better for myself. I want my life to look better. What's much, much easier is to say, I want better things for my kids. And at the moment, I think, things are getting so bad that it kind of becomes more like, I can't let this happen on my watch.
Mm.
As the one with a modicum of power, more power perhaps than I know, and looking at my children and the way the world is for them, or might be, if I just sit back and let things unfold, not on my watch. And so there was
Mm.
certainly a point at which, when I had my daughter, who's the eldest of my children, I just, something awoke in me. Suddenly, in a way, I was worth more.
Mm.
I remember a boss saying, I worked as a veterinary nurse at that time, and one of my bosses came in and he looked around the veterinary practice and he said, Oh, is nobody here yet? And I had literally, just birthed a child, come back from maternity leave, and something in me rose up. I was like, I I'm like, I'm a creatrix. I am a mother. How dare you walk into this room and say, is nobody here? I am here. I was so irate, but that stuff must have been happening for my entire career in that practice without it really registering, because I had a sense of self that was sort of not exactly rock bottom self-worth, but nothing to really pin it on.
I'll let it slide. It's not important. Am I really going to get into that today?
Mhm,
And then you
mhm.
birth a human, but specifically when you birth a daughter, you now realize everything I do, everything I be, everything I'm showing up as is the lesson. Everything that I am in front of her,
Yes.
it's who she's going to turn into.
And it's what she watches me tolerate, watches me stand for, watches me speak about, speak up about. All of that has just, she's 12 now. So I've sort of had
So
12
she
years.
understands what you're doing.
Oh, 100%. Both of my children are basically my spiritual teachers. If I'm a bit slow to the party in learning something, they'll spell it out for me for sure.
That's how I introduce my daughter, actually. This is my spiritual mentor.
I love that. I love that.
It gets a good laugh out of the wrong kind of people who don't understand it, and it gets
No,
true acknowledgement and, like, I've got you
yeah.
when you're talking to the right one.
And I'm
But
thinking there's nothing.
yeah, and I was gonna say, but also to her, she's listening to that every single day, right? It's building her agency.
Yes, yes. Because I'll often tell my kids, you're literally the wisest people I know. You're the clearest channels I know. You don't have
Yeah.
all of the bullshit, clouding your thinking. You know what's true. You know what's right. And you bring me home to that every single day. Sometimes, in a frustrating yeah, it's frustrating as a mother. That's part of the journey for me, is that I'm getting called out all the time, or rather called in to the work by them. And they're now at an age where they can come back to me and say, "I'm so glad that you've done the parenting courses, the work
Wow.
you've done." They literally tell me about once every fortnight, they're so glad that I've done that work.
Well, I assume they get to meet other parents in their walking through life, right?
Yes, they do.
So somehow they've concluded that you're not so bad.
Maybe they didn't get such a short straw after all. Yes, definitely.
So I'm really intrigued. How did you go from potentially this wallflower existence where someone could literally walk into a room and not see you, know you, acknowledge you, to this woman who's demanding reparations be made at a national and soon to be likely global level? Like there's a journey there.
Yes, yes. And it has to do with my daughter, and this friend that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, actually. So that's really come nicely full circle because I wasn't exactly a wallflower, but I definitely wasn't the woman I am today. And
Okay.
I had birthed this daughter, and she was about 2.5 at the time, or 3 perhaps. And there was a woman in the local area who ran yoga classes who ended up being my friend. I took her to these yoga classes, and the Fee, she was called Fee Munro, was kind of famous. She was like a campaigner basically around like ovarian cancer and the signs of ovarian cancer. And she would appear on TV a lot and in radio and stuff. And she was really an inspirational person, also a yoga teacher. So I took my daughter along to her kids' yoga classes. And I heard through the grapevine that she was going to be in this documentary, a BBC documentary, and it was called A Time to Live. So they had followed
Mm.
like 10 people with terminal diagnoses, mostly cancer, I think, who had made like life-changing decisions based on the fact that they knew that they had a finite sort of defined amount of time to live, and Fee was going to be featured on it. So I didn't have a TV at the time, so I went to a friend's house and I watched this documentary, and Fee was absolutely inspirational in it and amazing, but it was actually another woman's story that really spoke to me. So there was a woman who had been told she had 6 months potentially left to live, and she was asked, and she was told that, and then she went home and she sort of sat opposite her husband, and she thought to herself, if I have 6 months left to live, am I going to spend them in this life with him doing the boring things that we do and nothing much of anything? And said to herself, actually, no, that's not what I'm going to do. And sort of some of the other footage of her was her at a salsa class, and she'd left her husband and off she went. Now, because I was away at a friend's house watching this, it meant that I came home and I sat opposite my husband on the sofa, and I couldn't help but ask myself the question, if I had 6 months left to live, would I spend them with this man in this life? And I just
Oof.
couldn't gaslight myself. I was like, I wouldn't. So, with this woman in my life who stood for grabbing life and getting everything you could out of it, because she was genuinely angry at people who weren't doing that, because she was like, how dare you take life
Yeah.
so flippantly? It's
Yeah.
such a gift. How dare you? And I don't get that luxury. And we were in the end really close friends, but I sat there and I thought, no, what would I be waiting for? I'd be waiting for a terminal diagnosis to make me make this decision. And I don't choose
Don't
to
need that.
wait. I don't choose to wait for that. I choose out of sovereignty now that even though we have at the time a 9-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old daughter, I will leave and I will go after the life that I feel is really meant for me, which has been so blocked at various different times. Now, I just want to say, as somebody who's lent in a lot to personal development since then, I understand now that a lot of the blocks were within me. I can't put them on one man in the world and say he was responsible for me living a small life, because I've been through all of the you know different blocks I had to work through in terms of how I thought the world worked, relationships, everything, myself, who I was. But the thing is, when I next came to drop my daughter off for the yoga class with Fee, she would recount to me later that that day that I showed up to drop off, it was, a couple of days after I'd made the decision and told my ex-husband, she said it was like a completely different woman walked through the door.
I
So I
believe
can
you.
pinpoint it pretty much to that decision to go after life and to leave my marriage and do something different with my life.
Isn't it amazing that maybe the BBC is good for something?
Yeah, right? They've not ingratiated themselves recently, or indeed, at that time they were probably up to all sorts. But yes, that,
Wow.
yeah.
And I guess going back to your question of like, okay, I didn't pin all of this on this one man, sure, and you went through your own process. I think that, at least in my lived experience, that if you're meant to find your way back to each other as healed beings, like coming back in unity, like you would have. And so I think that there's something beautiful in knowing that you could now become the fullness of the expression of you without ever having to worry about, am I small enough to still fit with him?
Yes, yeah, for sure. And that has been my experience in other relationships as well. So I'm currently not in a relationship with not a romantic relationship with anybody, but that is when I feel the freest to really be totally expansive. And I know that in the future, that will be a piece of work for me in a relationship, to be able to be the essence of all that I am and feel that I'm still lovable and, in union with somebody in all of that.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of women in that pathway because partly it's that mothers need to take the same responsibility that you are in how am I raising a son? How am I actually showing up to my son so that he doesn't feel like women hate men, that mothers hate boys, or all of those kinds of nuances that a lot of modern men are dealing with in, feminist mothers. But also, how do men fit in a world where women are in their fullest power and their fullest expression is undeniably an incredible change at every level for men, for boys to enter into. And, it's not that we want a flip of the script where we're on top and they're on the bottom. That's not it. But it is going to feel like that for a lot of men as we find this equilibrium. But I think the challenge is they can't hear that we don't want power over them.
Yes, because we've existed for so long with a model of power that is power over. It's very difficult for people, especially if they haven't done a lot of work within themselves, to feel agency and choice and power, that the model of power within is the one that we would move forward with in the most healed timeline. But we don't have a blueprint for what that looks like. So my sense is that there will be some messy middle with this. And, again, in terms of the ask that we're making, a cameo by my son, the ask that we're making is, for it to be the right sized ask, it's actually more perhaps than would seem logical or right for now.
So tell me more about this. How did you come to understand this?
The right size
Jenny-
ask. Um, Hi.
Hello, Ollie.
I'll
It
tell you a
is
story about
early.
Ollie just now while he's here, which is to do with the church. Do you mind? Donate one. So I just want to say that Ollie healed something in me the day that he decided to become the first male donor to the church. So he donated 17% of his wealth to us at the church project. It was something you wanted to do, right, Els? Yeah, to
I
be
wanted to donate
50. You did.
actually.
And I should have let you donate 50, shouldn't I? Yeah. Yeah. So
And Ollie, why did you want to donate to the project and to your mom?
Because it seemed like a nice thing she was doing, and also it just felt good to donate to something.
Amazing. Amazing.
thanks, Polly. Thanks, my love.
I think it's just to make a note on this. I think one of the things that I've changed in my work style since I'm a mother. I was not a mother during COVID, not with a physical child anyway. And I found it very upsetting when people would apologize to me or get angry at their children. And I was like, do you think that I am more important than your child in your eyes? Because I'm no one to you. that child is everyone to you.
Yeah.
And it always irked me so deeply that people would chastise their children for interrupting their work, because it's like, your work is so secondary to your children. Like, your child is your primary job. And I remember when I left venture capital and I started saying to people, they're like, "What are you doing now?" I was like, "I've just received the greatest promotion of my life. I've been waiting for this for years." And they were like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" This, her. I am a mother. And they would laugh and I wouldn't. And I would say, I'm going to repeat what I said. And I'm going to ask you to feel in your body what I just said.
Mm.
And it was extraordinary to claim that. You know, it's very similar to what your I am here moment was, because it was like, no, I am replaceable
Yeah.
at everything else that I do in this world except this. And my child doesn't go to care, you know, and so I get a lot of commentary about that. And
Yeah.
so when I do podcasts and she comes in, the end of story, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's going back to what you said before. The work is mother, to be mother. And we see how there is this deep lack of mothering and mother energy in almost every aspect of life. Incarceration happens because we do not have enough mother energy in a system where nuance is required. Is punishment and long-term incarceration really the way forward? And most of the time, the reason that those people are even in that situation is because of a lack of mothering. And so the punishment is to remove even more mother care from them. It makes no sense. And you could go around every single aspect. So I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier, is that this primary project that you're on is the restoration of mother.
Yes. And it's so interesting to me because this project is the hardest I've ever worked in the work sense in my entire life. You know, it is the most time I've invested. It's the first time I've ever felt compelled to get up at 5 a.m. You know, it's all of that stuff that people talk about. And I've always thought, oh, influencers, yeah, that's not my life. But these days, if I wake at 4 and I know my kids will get up at 9, well, you know, I think,
What? How did you make that happen?
well, they are 12 and 9 because
Okay, I'll
so
wait for it.
we're now a home educating family, which I'm really delighted about. And yeah, so they have their own timescale, and it basically involves zero bedtime and getting up when they please. So yes, that's how that happened. But the part of the work is to acknowledge that I'm so often smushed between my big work in the world and my big work in the world. You know, the two things I care so deeply about. And the reason that I can sort of justify, you know, spending any time away from my kids or, you know, doing anything that's not focusing entirely on them at this particular point in time in history in my life is that I cannot actually, I think, you know, there's this knowing in me that so often women are so bogged down in all of
Mm,
that, that they don't get an opportunity to make systemic change happen.
yes,
And the ones
almost
that
like it's
do
by
have,
design.
yeah, yeah, almost as if it's by design. And, you know, I am attracting criticism for home educating. I'm attracting criticism for the fact that I'm working while home educating, despite being the only person who's making money come into the house. So I do need to work in order to raise my children. I'm encountering the deep injustice of the amount of money that the government deems men should pay the mothers of their children if they're absent or largely absent. You know, the amount of money that it is deemed I should receive and support my children with is so far below what is required to give them a life that raises them out of poverty, that brings them, you know, the what they deserve, essentially, you know, the chances of a life that they deserve. I need to fill that gap. You know, I need to be doing this to be able to do this the way I want to do it, and sacrifice this a little bit to do this very well, and then sacrifice this a little bit to do this very well. And this smush, if I didn't have like a decade's worth of emotional regulation tools,
Oh, yeah.
which so many people don't have, if I didn't have the gift of what I've been given when I won the competition with the ask of the Church of Scotland, if I didn't have a collective group of women doing this work with a woman heading us up, Kasia Urbaniak, who is so well versed in power and power dynamics and how we make big things happen in the world, I would be like every other woman, cut adrift, just trying to keep my head above water,
Totally.
like I have been for a decade. So to me, there's something about this project that I'm so committed to bringing it to fruition, because I feel that it could genuinely be like an about turn, so that when a woman's child turns up on a podcast or in a meeting, she's not seen as anything other than the excellent person that she still is, being all of this.
Yeah. And that's the congruence, right? That's the coherence. That who I be in front of the camera is who I be with my children, is who I be when I sit down one day, with the Archbishop, with the Pope, with whomever, the Prime Minister, with whomever I'm sitting in front of. If I get all the way to the King and I am going to say what I am going to say, I am going to be me. And my transmission of truth comes through my me-ness.
Yeah.
And I think the diminishment of the power of me has been so orchestrated for so long that we diminish the power of our motherhood, we diminish the power of our voice, we diminish the power of our essence. It's just like, if you're embarrassed by your children, look at your own self. If you're embarrassed by your voice, look at your own self. It's all of this. And so I totally honor you and celebrate you for not the work that you're doing in terms of these reparations, because of course I do, but because you are the kind of mother that embraces her son when you're doing a so-called important work thing, because your important work thing was acknowledging your son. And I think that that divine interruption is the lesson here, is like the true work that we are doing is raising our children in the essence of what we believe is integrity, of what we believe is power and right and true. And you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And for me, it's no mistake, nothing is a mistake, but it's no mistake that this is the particular point in time at which their needs became such that really, for me, to be in integrity, the only choice was to bring them home and have them home with me. Sending them into a place where they were telling me with every fiber of their being they were not being supported in the way that they needed to be supported, not being honoured in the way that they need to be honoured. I don't know about Australia, but in the UK there is a big turning tide of people starting to home educate.
The largest growing education style in Australia and New Zealand.
There we go. So I'm sure it's the same in the UK, and I think lots of different places, because our children are our spiritual teachers, and they're so wise, and their eyes are so open to what's right for them and what's wrong for them. But unfortunately, so many people have to get to the point where their child is absolutely burnt out before they will acknowledge that's something needs to change, or before they realize, I won't say will acknowledge, but really realize, within themselves, because we've all been so conditioned to stuff it all down and ignore what's going on for us. But what this generation of children, I think, is showing us is that time, we're done with that. That's not happening anymore. And, for me, part of this is to be like a sentinel at the gate that is my children, where I say, you know what? You think everything you need to think. You label them anxious, call it emotional based school avoidance if you want. What I'm going to see in my children is sovereignty, wisdom, the ability to guide themselves through their own learning. And I'm not going to pathologize, particularly my daughter, as she comes up to puberty. There's something where ceremony is completely lost. And instead, we're going to pathologize and say that, her starting to change the places and spaces and relationships that she wants in her life is completely natural and normal, makes absolute sense, comes from a huge about turn in her hormones and everything that's
Yeah.
going on for her and the way she's thinking and her brain development. And I'm just
Yeah.
looking at my kids going, I don't need anybody else to interpret this for me. I'm their mother and I know what's best. And unfortunately, this comes back to the power over, power within thing, me making that decision on my own without referencing a psychologist or, really listening to the school or even my ex-husband.
But who could you be as the mother of these children to make this decision for them? And you're
Yeah.
like, you've already referenced the answer.
Yes. Because
It's interesting because it ties back into the work that you're doing, right? If we had women in sisterhood, we would all be functioning with work, with herbalism, with medicine, with all of the roles and all of the functionalities of a society, of a village, and the children would simply exist. And I think that's why there's this resurgence of village in any way that people can get it. And I
yeah.
think that it is hard to get it, and it is hard to get it right, but there's also something about the village that is very hard for people who haven't done inner work to actually live in, which is you don't get to choose who lives in the village with you. And so you need to learn how to get along with people that you don't always like. And that's not something that's the same as a family. A family, you love them in their blood. A village, even if you don't and, something brings you back, but a village is we have function. Each individual has a function, a cog in a cohesive network. And I don't always need to like you or love you, but we need to work together. It's very similar to a workplace in some ways. But it's different in others where you actually do need to work through difficulty and come to a harmonic outcome where the society works together and functions in resonance. And so it is super hyper amazing, personal development work to actually come back into sisterhood.
Yes. And this is something I recognize is going to be a real edge for me as I sort of lead this. It's a campaign at the moment, but my sense is really it's a movement. I have always been, when I'm in community with people, I will often bring this idea that if somebody steps outside of our sort of group agreements, breaks the rules, harms somebody, that the most powerful thing that we could do would be to come together in circle and to begin with speaking all of the things that person brings, that are positive, that we enjoy, that are valuable and contribute to community before we address what's happened as a situation. But what I found, and I do not know what the culture is like in other different places, but in Britain, it's almost like that invitation has people double down on the idea, no, they will be punished. We must uphold the rules and it must be punitive and harsh and quick. In a way, I think this is part of why rather than joining something, I'm leading something. Because for me, there's something about this, and you sort of mentioned it earlier, and it's like this idea that what we're looking at here is like reparative or restorative justice. And that idea flies in the very face of what you were talking about in terms of, incarcerating people and punishing them. And the vast majority of people, if you survey them, say that they want people to be punished and that is the most effective way to do it. But research tells us that is not the case. That is not the case. It's easy to look in on somebody else's situation and say, I could be compassionate towards that person who did harm. Part of my journey back in 2021 was that I had very personal harm done to me, like the most intimate kind of harm that you can have done. And my sense was that what needed to happen was restorative justice. That didn't exist really as a system in Scotland at that time. If I had gone down the route of pursuing it, I would have been probably the first woman in Scotland to pursue restorative justice for that kind of crime. But as with so many women, I was mothering, I was running a business, it was COVID, I had rather a lot too much on my plate to be pursuing something so big at that time.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the door is closed, but what it did bring me to was a real deep inner knowing that even if it's me at the center of the harm, I am the one who is harmed, I still believe deep in my soul that restorative justice, reparative justice is the way to go.
I love what you just said because it's given me a reflection point into my lived experience that shows that I actually believe that. And I think that if you haven't gone through these really capital T traumas and seen your reaction and what you truly believe in your core, you don't know that about yourself. And I think for anyone who's gone through trauma, like genuine injustice, like people really harming you, this is like an invitation point to reframe this terrible thing into, wow, I actually truly believe what I believe, like what I say I believe. That's my actions are congruent to that. And I just like feel like this wave of like self-forgiveness and like self-release actually from just what you've said.
Mm.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what you've learned about power in this journey that you've since making this bold ask and this bold claim and going on this journey into investigating at a very deep, visceral level power and power dynamics and personal power. What have you learned? What has changed within you? Who are you now that you are just in such shock or celebration of as a result?
So the way that I have begun to work with power is around attention, and
Mm.
whether your attention is in on your inner experience or out on the other person if you're in a one-to-one dynamics, and out in a group if you're in a sort of group dynamics. In many ways, I feel like a real noob in terms of power and power work
Okay.
and power dynamics. And I also recognize that this is something I've been playing with for quite a long time. So I'm going to tell a story, which is about a time when a plumber came to my house and I wasn't in. And he took it upon himself, because he was in a cupboard that had a variety of different things in, took it upon himself to steal a wedding and engagement ring, my wedding and engagement ring that were in the cupboard. Now, I wouldn't have known for possibly years, except that he sort of slipped up. And I think he thought he was being clever, but he took the little ornate box, which my cousin had made as a wedding gift, that was wooden box, and he threw it under the bed. So the next day, or a couple of days after, my daughter was crawling around on the floor and she said, "Why is there a box under the bed?" And this is one of those magical moments.
Why would he do that?
I don't know, because he should have just left it there with no rings in it, and I would have moved house 3 years later, never known until I don't know what would have happened that would have. Anyway, it was stupid, and I don't know why he did it, but he did. And there's something in the power around that as well, because there's like this sense of being clever when it wasn't. Something in the power dynamics there. And my daughter found the box and she said, "What's this box under the bed?" And even without seeing, there was something like dropped in as a knowing, like this intuitive sense of it's the little wooden box and it's because the plumber stole the rings. But I just instantly knew it. It was really weird. Let me just see if I can. Come here. So anyway, I called the police. I called him. He denied it. But I had been reading these 3 books, and I wish it was 2, but it's 3, and I can't remember the third one, One was by a police negotiator. It's called Never Split the Difference.
I've read that one. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. The other one was Instant Influence by Michael Pantalon. And it's a 7-step process to get anybody to do anything, quite a sort of masculine process, but it was useful and, interesting, and about power and influence. And the third one, I can't remember, but there was something about those 3 books that I'd literally just been reading. I thought, I'm just going to go back through them on like highlighter pen, and I'm going to see what I can do. Because the police told me there's nothing you can do to get these rings back. If he did take them, which we can't prove, what are you going to do? He's going to deny it. It's your word against his. Sorry. And I thought to myself, nah, not sorry. Not sorry. Let's just see. Because I'm not your average woman who's had her rings stolen. I'm somebody who's really been working with influence quite a lot recently. So here we go. Let's try this. So I rang him and I recruited his help. I can't understand it. I just can't understand what might have happened. The rings were there and now they're gone. Do you think you might be able to help me understand what could have happened? So he started, well, maybe, has your ex-husband still got a key? Perhaps he's come and taken them. Perhaps this other thing happened. Every, no Occam's razor for him. Every outlandish thing you could think of, he was coming up with. And so in the end, he asked if he could come round to talk about it. And I thought, well, I don't really want him to come back round, but, we'll have a conversation. We both recorded each other during this conversation. And then as the final move, he said, could he just come and show me what he did with the boiler and how it would have been impossible for him to have stolen the rings. And at the end of that, he pointed up at the flue. And when I went to close the door, here on the floor in their little bag were these 2 rings. And I looked at him and I said, get the out of my house. If I ever see you in this village again, you are going down. It was like the most rage I've ever actually directed at a person, because he had gaslit me. He would have had me believe I was mad. And to me, it was almost like a microcosm of everything that goes on with women in the world in terms of being told they're mad and told they've got things wrong. And yet somehow deep inside of us, we know what's happened. We know what's true. We know, and so often we're in the kind of prey place where we can't access what we need within our nervous system to meet it in generative, powerful, dynamic, influential ways. And my sense is that I've been learning those skills for a really good reason. And that this last little phase over the last 4 months, where I've been working quite closely with Kasia Baniak in, her whole body of work is about women and power. And I'm starting to sort of unpick what it is I already knew and build on it. But I've got these really solid foundations of nervous system regulation that so many women, because of what we're subjected to through life, so often don't have. And that's been my focus of work over the last few years, is not only to drop in a few of these influence and power skills, but mostly to say to women, if you're going to build what you want to build in life, first, you need to understand that probably the foundations you're working with are pretty shaky, and they probably need to be pulled out, laid again. And then you can start to believe that actually what you build is on rock solid foundations, and you have no need to worry if a little bit of it crumbles, and because you've still got, what you need to keep building, to keep going back.
What are some of those rock solid foundational building tools? Like, what have you learned on that? Because, I'm looking at the woman in front of me and I'm thinking, holy hell. She believes that this is inevitable. She believes that this church is going to pay reparations, and she believes that I can feel in her body the certainty. And then you tell me a story from, not that long ago on the scheme of things, where it was possible that you didn't believe. True, like there was shakiness there. So what is it that you've done to really believe in yourself? Like, with the level of certainty and the level of yelling at a man that could physically harm you in your own home with your children in there, and knowing that you're safe and knowing that you're going to eviscerate him with your voice and with your power. Because that's not just asking a man to get out. That's not just like, oh, there they are. Silly me. you so much. Oh my
Mm.
goodness. I'm so glad you were here. And just like playing the dumb damsel to get out. Like you made a choice to lock eyes and give him a piece of your mind. And I'm so curious as to how you build that certainty in you.
Okay. So there's this sort of knowing in me that aren't as powerful as they think they are. That there is I'm wondering sort of how to tell this. Like I did as a fairly new coach, I somehow got my way into an organization that works with veterans. And they work with veterans, mostly men, but some female veterans and some sort of families of, to really heal trauma at its very root level. And that is the work, that I've done across the last sort of 8 years. There's something in that, right? Because if you have experiences in your life that have traumatized you, that's some shaky foundations. Now, going back to them as an adult or as
Mm,
somebody who escaped that situation and allowing perspectively yourself to look back at it, remaining in the here and now, letting your body, your whole system, everything about you know that's in the past. Now, there's something about this body of work that I've done, which is all about our perspective, so that there's no story I can tell myself that I'm completely convinced by about who I am, life, how the world works. There's something in that. There's something in how people wanting to have certainty trips them up
mm,
in the deeper grounding of, I think, something you said earlier, which is like, if it's in the future, it remains to be seen. We do not know. But my work with veterans, men who could have been said to be like the strongest, the most capable, the most able, the ones who went and did things that took immense amounts of bravery. And here they
mm,
are as a human, harmed in that process, sitting in front of me with rock bottom self worth and
mm.
no hope. There's this triangle of despair: hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness. For me, what you're asking, it's almost like there's that triangle. How do we exist in the exact opposite? Deep
Yeah.
worth, deep hope, knowing that we have agency and that the universe, our community, it wants us to succeed. That body of work, it's huge. It goes in all directions. It's of the mind, it's embodiment work, 100%. When you first asked, the first thing that came up for me was this moment I had, which really was like an existential moment. I think it's the type of thing that a lot of people would access through kind of plant medicine. But I've
Yeah.
I've worked a lot with my mind, and I got there, one Saturday afternoon with the kids away playing in the other room or something. And I was sat there in a real crisis because I was doing this work with veterans and it was paying me okay. And it was the pandemic and I really didn't have like lots of other clients dropping in. But I also recognized that really my work in the world was supposed to be with women. And I was a little bit in crisis about how to bridge that gap, how to
Yeah.
make money and it sort of seemed to me that to give up the paid work was like really stupid. But
Mm,
equally, to not do the work I'm supposed to do in the world was like a crime against myself. And I decided to do something that's called the tetralemma, where you hold both truths and then you sort of pick them apart. And it's quite a long, involved process. It really helps to have somebody else do it for you. But I was just kind of messily working through it in the way that I have oftentimes. And so I sort of, I went to like absolutely not true that it would be stupid to give up this work. It would be the most genius move I ever made. And it would be the stupidest thing I ever did in my life. It's absolutely not true that I have to work with women. And it's the truest thing, and I just went pick, pick, pick all the way all over the place. And then I came back to like this absolute moment of total freedom and choice to do whatever I needed to
mm.
do. It did matter at its deepest, and it absolutely didn't matter at all. And I would say that place is almost all of my foundations come from that ability to clear the whole thing in my system, to have almost no emotional charge around something. But that is the gateway to like a deep, deep knowing, so that I'm not just following emotions all the time, through life. And to all intents and purposes, like when I work with other people, that's the kind of thing I'm guiding them towards. So that wherever their trauma lies in relationships, with money, you know, any other aspect of life, there's always that liberation work to be done that leaves them neutral and clear and able to choose.
It's interesting how you say this because on this podcast, I talk to a lot of women about desire. But after all of these interviews, I think I've done 50 interviews with women who work in the realm of desire now, and read Kasha's book and know Kasha obviously as well. And the way that she talks about desire and the way that most of these women talk about desire, it's not how people interpret it to be. It's not this passion-filled excitement charge. It's what's left when all of that is cleared away, right? I have, for about 12 years now, repeated one sentence that I didn't understand until very recently. Your desire is not yours to choose. Your desire does not come from you. Your desire will be there no matter what. No matter if you like it, no matter if you feel excited about it, no matter if you are having an off day, no matter if you fall in deep depression, your desire is. And I think people have had the idea of desire hijacked by the sexual community, by sexual definition. But what you're talking about is in the absence of, or even in the presence of, this matters more than anything, this matters less than nothing. And both of those can be true, or none of those can be true. It's that center point of like, what's left. That's what we call, maybe desire can still confuse people. And so it's just like blueprint. It's like the center. It's just who you are. It's just who you are. You can take away all your ego. You can take away all your personality traits that come from trauma, that come from childhood conditioning, that come from hard work, that come from all of these things. If you take away all of those personality traits, who are you left with? You. And most people don't even know who that is. So they don't know who their blueprint is or their desire is. They don't know what to do if nothing's motivating them, or if they don't have to get up in the middle of the day. And going back to what you said about your children doing homeschool education, where they now organize their own lives. In the absence of not having someone else tell you what to do you know what's calling you forward? Because as an entrepreneur or someone on a mission, it will not be interesting every day. So what are you getting up for? It's the desire. It's the blueprint, right?
Right.
And when you don't get trained to do that as a child, you don't know how to do it as an adult.
No.
You've just blown my mind in terms of like reshifting power as a completely neutral center point, actually. Is that right? Have I misinterpreted?
For me, that's what's right. My sense for women at this particular time is that what we are being called to is this idea that within us, we hold our own truth. I do have the idea that that truth is probably very similar for a lot of women. And I think in part, that's why this project that I'm working on to reclaim a church as reparations for women who were following their truths and were persecuted for it. I get the sense that that is why this resonates with people, women specifically, some men, all across different lands, across different cultures, across different languages, across different religions. My sense is that there's something true at the center of this understanding of power, which is about it being centered completely in us. And it is hard to articulate because it's not taught to us, you know? It's an embodied process. Like I've had this vision quite a few times now where I am seeking, understanding about something or a big question in my life, something's going on and I want some wisdom. And so I will go to this inner chamber within me and I will go and seek the wisdom. I go into this massive earth chamber and there's like a column, sort of like a altar kind of pillar in the middle. It has a book on it and the book looks massive and I think, great, here are the answers. I will go and seek the answers from the book of wisdom. And I walk up to this pillar, open the book, and it is empty. There are no words to reference. There's something about that for me right now is like, That's we're being called to the knowing within. Mine has always had a bit of a piss take. If I ask it, really trivial questions, it's like, are you really? Is that what you're going to ask me? You have the book of everything and you're going to ask me whether you should buy that pretty dress. But it's in our bodies. It's the reason it's called remembering is because it's a literal remembering of ancient wisdom that courses through our veins, that's here to reference at any time.
And what is your vision for this future that is on the other side of the inevitability of this church? What does
Mm.
that look?
I'll go for me personally because I'm speaking to a lot of people about this project, and it represents a lot of hope for a lot of people for particular things that they want to have happen. For me, when we get the church, it will stand as a marker of the fact that women are reclaiming power now at this
Mm.
particular point in history because we know what to do to make things better and to heal things. Behind the church, I'm already gathering like a council of women, women with brilliant ideas, a lot of wisdom and knowledge about how to make them happen. And I intend for them to be in conversation within the organization around the kinds of things that we're going to make happen. One vision that I had for the church already is that it would be the center point for almost like a symposium or a conference where all of the heads of women's charities would come to reimagine how funding works for women's work in Scotland, maybe the UK, but starting with Scotland. And it seems to me that when we can kind of collectively gather as women and have these conversations about how things work, so that we're not always working at the level of trying to fit in with how things currently work, trying to, for example, get funding for women's work as a charity, fighting another charity for a pot of funding. Instead, my sense is that what needs to happen now is we have conversations at this level and we say, look, currently funding for women's work works like this, and we're all working very hard at this level to try and get enough money to make change happen. But actually, what we need to do is we need to say, no, money needs to be available like this. And it needs to be flowing to us freely so that we can do the work that we need to do. And I can sense that that conversation done like that in women's charitable work, in healthcare, in education, in social services, in all sectors, it needs to be flipped on its head. We need to be having conversations like that. And for me, this project represents like a line in the sand where we say, we're not doing it like this anymore. It is not working for women. It's not working for children. It's not working for the earth that we live upon. And actually, if you're really, really honest, it's not working for men either. So let's do it differently. And it starts here like this. And it's why I'm so committed to making this project be as visible as possible, as coherent and cohesive as possible, because that's what it represents. And I don't think there's anything more important at this particular point in history than making that happen.
You should just be so proud of who you are becoming, of who you already are. Have I got you still?
You do.
Just in case.
So sorry, I muted myself. Thank you.
I'm so grateful for this conversation. I have received so much out of it. I think there's a few takeaways that I really want to just round out, and it's so much harder as a woman to work at a smaller level because you have to work in a system that is not designed for your biotechnology. The biotechnology of women is coming in connection, in resonance with each other, in resonance with the earth, and allowing ourselves to shift back into the natural order of things where synchronicities and spontaneity, where creation just flows. And you, as you said in the beginning of the call, is you're just following the thread. There are crumbs and you are following it. You have set the agenda. You have said, I am here for this call. I am going to be the spearhead of reparations made to women in Scotland and beyond. I accept this challenge. Have me go where I am needed. Have me do what I need to do. I am not in charge of the how, but I am the vehicle through which this manifests, through which we create this vision and this outcome. And I am going to allow my children to witness me in that. I am going to allow the world to witness me in that. And I'm going to allow myself to grow into the woman, into the power that I need in order to create that. It's extraordinary. That's my first takeaway.
Thank you.
The second takeaway is anywhere where there's charge, where there's too much expectation, where there's too much need, where there's too much grabbiness, where if this doesn't happen, then something terrible is going to happen and I'm never going to be okay as a person, the foundation is not solid enough to build it on. I love that. And I think your take on how power has grown within you was very unexpected to me. I thought you would say something completely different, like I had to do some kind of vagus nerve reconditioning and hold the vision of my power bigger and bigger and bigger. I didn't know you were going to say I'm going to dismantle the thing completely and build it up into this huge thing that it could ever be, to find the equilibrium point of nothing. Like that was like, and then my third takeaway is this world needs to understand, women, mothers need to understand the power of the mother and who she births herself into. Because what I'm hearing from you and what I know from my own story is your children are not the thing that's making your work harder. Your children define the importance of the work worth doing. And it's like that documentary right at the start. It's like, if you're going to die in 6 months' time, is this the work you want to be doing? Is this the most important thing you can do with what limited time you have left? And I think that's just such a valuable reframe.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Beautiful takeaways.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, oh, I'm going to start thinking bigger because of you.
Thank you. I'm hearing that a lot. And it's strange to me, but I do think I've gone about it in quite a different way than a lot of people do, almost by necessity because of being a mother. And I think if that is one takeaway that people have, that this the necessity of doing it differently because you're a mother could be the
Yeah,
liberation you didn't know you needed.
totally.
Mm.
Oh, I think learning, if you're a mother with a small child like me, if you're learning right from the start that you can do your work and have your child around you, and my child is witness right from the start. She's involved in the process. She's involved in my other business, which is, creating products, and she's involved in this. She's on the podcast as much as sometimes I edit her out, but sometimes I don't. And, it's this knowledge that children are not meant to be separate from us, and we need to rewire that right from the start. So do your work in front of your children. Allow them to give you ideas. Allow them to contribute. They're not meant to be stuck in a building somewhere,
Mm, mm.
and neither are we, for that matter.
No, definitely not.
I could talk to you for the next 10 years of my life. I would learn so much from you.
Here's
Thank
hoping
you
we do.
so much. Just hoping we do. Please allow us to know how we can support you, how we can follow you, how you want us to add our voices to your most important war cry. And finally, what you're doing in terms of building a collective of women in this movement.
Amazing. Yes. Okay. So you have reached me like right at the beginning of this. And so we will have a website, which is
Hey,
ourreclamation.org. But we have been gifted the most incredible thing, which is like a massive branding package where it's really going to be the bee's knees. And so in a way that puts us slightly back a step because we could have just gone scrappily out there and just started getting all over social media, but we're going to be a bit more coherent than that. So we're going to
so
need.
did you ask and then this was given to you? Good for
Well,
you.
this is interesting because the asks I'm making, Kate, right now are for conversations. My most powerful ask is for conversations with the most expansive person I can think of in that given moment. And that has got me so far. And then the beautiful magnetism of this project is that once that conversation happens and people hear what's going on, they will offer something way beyond I could ever have imagined asking for. I could not have imagined asking the company that does Sephora's branding for a complete branding package for free. No, I would not have asked for that. I didn't ask for that. It was offered in just this beautiful organic way. I was quite coherent about like where we're at and what we're doing, and then the offer came in for something that really moves us forward really well. So it's interesting. It's actually something
I feel
I'm
like
like
a branding package is less than a huge apology and reparations and a church, though. That's so funny.
I know. That's the weird thing. That's the really weird thing about this whole thing. And I'm working with that at the moment, like how that works, because y- there is a balance between magnetism and asking, magnetism and asking. And I'm kind of working with both at the moment, quite generatively, it seems. So I'm just
Maybe your energy is doing the asking for you, so you don't have to use your voice exactly every time.
Yes, I think that might be exactly. I'm so in tune with and aligned with what I'm doing that I think it's magnetic. So that's another lesson to take away. But um,
Definitely.
so we have our website coming. We will be running a big social media campaign. At the moment, it looks like we might be using a tag like "I am witch," where women will be able to add their voice to things that they do that could have had them burned as a witch, or drowned as a witch. So that will be a part of it. There will probably also be a change.org petition that people's individual names can go. And then if people run organizations and would like to organizationally back us by sending a letter, we already have a few from sort of interfaith organizations, for example, saying we support this action, we think that this would be fair reparations. That is something that could happen. And then, we're kind of scrappy on the ground organization. We need practical help. We need people doing stuff as well. So if anybody wants to kind of approach me personally and offer time, energy. And there is also an active crowdfunder. So although we hope to get, I've said hope, we intend to get the church for free, and it's an expensive church, but it also needs quite expensive works done on it. So one of the things that we need to do is demonstrate that we will be able to steward this building appropriately. So we are gathering funds for work that will need done to bring it to be the centre that we want it to be for female authority, because it will be absolutely beautiful. That will cost some money. So we are gathering
And where is the
donations.
church, and what's the specific church you're asking for?
The church is in Edinburgh, and it is called North Leith Church on Madeira Street in Leith in Edinburgh. And I thought it was a randomly chosen church, although I knew that it needed to be a prominent church in a prominent place for to kind of be the spearhead, the figurehead of this thing. And then, as with everything in this project, something dropped in for me to realize that there was more magic than I thought at play. And that was that my granddad and a generation older than him grew up like less than 2 miles from this church. So it's not really a randomly chosen church, but it felt like it when I picked it.
Beautiful. And my final question to you is what makes any of us a witch?
What makes me a witch is a funny one, because this project came to me and it was an idea that landed with me. And I've asked myself this question, why me? What is it about, am I witch enough? Has been the question within me. Am I witch enough? But I think the thing is, what makes any of us witch is our collective feminine wisdom and the way that we feel compelled to enact that and to embody it. So, what can make a woman witch is the way she moves her body, the way she uses her words, the way she births her child, the way she cooks, the way she gardens, the way she tends animals, the way she bees in the world is what makes a woman witch.
Well, Becoming Flame has welcomed its first official out and loud witch on the podcast. I can't believe it's taken this long to reclaim the fire, to reclaim the flame, to reclaim the burning and into the becoming. So, with my greatest honor and my greatest respect. I bow to you, Witch Standen.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Thank
we
you
made it
so
almost
much.
all the way through without the dogs.
That's life. That's
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 life.
that's how we roll.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.